Sponsored by Paradigm Lost. Affordable gaming accessories with a twist.
The legend tells of 3 mystic crystals fated with lack of knowledge. Only the 3 mages, Professor Dex from Phoenix, D20 from Cleveland, and Lore from the Forgotten Realms, have the knowledge to replenish these crystals. This is the DM Toolbox, Tales from the Edge. Hello to all of our character sheets. This is back DM Toolbox Tales from the Edge. What is going on with you guys? We are here with Lore. We are here with Professor Dex.
Yo.
We are here with D20. That is me. What is here to see? But you can't see me because you're hearing me on the podcast.
Great intro. All right. All right, so what are we doing today, guys?
What's going on with today's round of sound?
I guess we're talking about controlling tables, right?
Yeah, table control, how to run your group. That's kind of what we're focusing on today.
Okay.
There's a lot of intricacies. There's a little bit of science involved. I'm going to try to keep that to a minimum. But let's just jump right into it, guys. So, what is table control?
I guess making sure the players are paying attention to you and not their phones.
Okay, fair. Okay, that's definitely part of it.
It's when you stand at the front of the table with a whip and you make them play the game.
That's a little too kinky, I think. Anyway.
Wow. Wow. That woke me up.
So... when you're playing role-playing games, it's not alone, right? You got other people there. And so what that means is you're going to have a bunch of people, some of them may not even know each other that well, playing a really sort of intimate game with each other. And by intimate, I don't mean like, relationship status. What I'm talking about is you're going to be in close proximity, physically and emotionally. If you're running a really good game, I'd say halfway through the game, you're going to have people making friendships and inside jokes and all of these things. But as we all know, inside jokes just in themselves, they can get out of control, right? Mm-hmm. Some people's feelings are going to get hurt. Somebody's going to get upset. And how do we deal with that? Well, I'm going to tell you, preventative maintenance.
Oh, I've heard that term before.
Sounds real familiar, doesn't it?
Sounds real familiar.
So, how do we do that? All right. Well, in science, we call it behavioralism. All right. This is the psychology aspect of it. And there's different types of behaviorism. There's classical conditioning, there's operant conditioning, and there's observational learning. All right. So, when you think of, classical stuff, you may have heard, Pavlov's dog, where he rings a bell every time he feeds him, and then the dog comes rushing up and expects food. That's behavioral conditioning, all right? So what that means is every time I ring a bell, we've got D20 over here, he's hungry for something.
Isn't that like the thing where, every day at noon, when you ring a bell, you can make a dog... mouth water?
Exactly. Yeah, that was Pavlov.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that's what I'm saying. Basically, and you can do this with humans too. It's not just dogs. You can do it with humans. We call it routines. So every morning you get up and you brush your teeth. Mm-hmm. Why? Because you were scared to death by somebody telling you that you're going to lose your teeth if you don't.
Right.
That's behavioral conditioning. It's changing your behavior.
Yeah, every time I hear, hey, it's time to go cast some dice, all I hear from me is,
no!
So let me ask you this. Every morning I make a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
You are not going to get any cooperation from me unless I make a cup of coffee.
Okay.
So how would that rank?
So that's actually a mix.
Okay.
So part of that is that behavior because you're doing that behavior because it's your routine. You're not even thinking about it.
Yeah.
You just wake up and you're making coffee. However, you just talked about operant conditioning right there. Okay. You ain't getting anything from me until I get my coffee. That's operant conditioning because it has to do with your motivations.
Okay.
So basically, you have an intrinsic motivation to get that coffee because it makes you feel good, it makes you prepared for the day. You have the extrinsic motivation, which is I'm getting that caffeine. That caffeine that's the carrot and stick. Think of it that way. You have two different types of motivations. You've got the carrot and stick, and then you have that sort of, I really want to make a podcast today, or I really want to play D&D today, because that makes me feel good. That's intrinsic motivation. And so
I hate to be that guy, but can you explain what intrinsic means? Because you got me 75% of the way.
It comes from within. You give yourself that motivation, or an extrinsic thing is it's something else giving you the motivation.
Have you ever seen Kung Fu movies?
Yes, I live in the United States.
where the old master's like, you must find the power within. He's talking about intrinsic motivation.
Okay.
That drive to do something that comes from your soul.
Okay.
Where extrinsic motivation is
it's raining, so I should get an umbrella.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because I don't want to get wet. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And that kind of leads us to the last thing is observational learning. So, what do you think that means? You look,
probably like watching instructional videos, how to fry an egg, how to tie your tie.
Actually, you're not wrong. So, observational learning really comes from our social environment as well as the environment itself. So, let's say you're playing D&D and you're new to D&D, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody else is playing D&D and you sit at the table and by the end of the night you know how to play D&D because you were watching everybody. That's observational learning.
Okay. And that could probably go positive and negative.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly, depending on the experience. If everybody's picking on each other and you have a really toxic table, how are they going to learn?
Well, I mean, like, the way I was thinking about it is like, okay, like one thing, and this is probably like way off, you know what I'm saying, that DMs hate is when a player rolls their die and immediately picks it up. You know what I'm saying? So if they see that the first time they're playing, they're going to grow bad habits.
Exactly.
But, you know, it's a slippery slope. I'm not going to harp on it. I'm not going to harp on that. But, you know, positive things could lead to negative things lead to positive things. Because if you're at a negative table, you know what you're not going to stand for. You know what I'm saying? But if you're at a really positive table, you're just like, okay, so what's the dirty side of it? You know? That's just human nature.
So that also leads us to the environmental learning, right? So if social learning is learning from other people, what do you think maybe learning from your environment means?
I am a black person, so I refuse to answer this question on a podcast. I'm just being honest.
Well, it just depends on, like, if the environment's a constructive environment, you know, you're going to be able to learn from it, you're going to be able to grow from it, you're going to be able to contribute to it. But if the environment is, like you said, if it's a toxic environment, you're not going to learn anything. You're just going to learn that people hate each other.
So that's actually pretty close. That's kind of a combination of the two. But so, all right, we live in a desert, right?
Yes, we are located in Tucson, Arizona.
So that's our environment, all right? And what does that mean? What do you got to do all day? You got to drink water.
Correct.
Because that is environmental learning. You got to learn that you got to drink water all the time here in the desert because you will dehydrate really fast. That's environmental learning. Basically, let's put this in a D&D aspect, all right?
Okay.
So you're at a table, and that table is janky. Every time you roll, your dice roll off the table. So what do? You learn to bring your dice tray.
Now, I don't think that would be, from what you're describing, environmental learning. I think that would be the the one from within.
Intrinsic?
That's not intrinsic motivation. The reason why it's environmental learning is because it's not a person that is causing you to learn. Yes, your motivation to learn is coming from within. That's your motivation.
Okay.
But the reason why you're learning is because the environment is forcing you to adapt.
So you're talking about the physical environment. You're talking about the physical environment.
That's why it's separated from
the room you're in, the table you're at, the chairs you sit in.
Yes.
Okay, because that's not what I thought you meant when you said environmental.
And all of these things can affect you. Like, for instance, you know what? I learned that I like having music in my games because it affects the environment. It can affect how people play the game.
Yeah.
And it also increases focus.
Yeah.
Because it keeps the side chatter to a minimum and people focus on the music, on the game, on what's going on.
Okay.
And so that's sort of that environment. When we talk about environment, 9 times out of 10, we're talking about something physical.
Okay.
We're talking and what how that physical kind of side of things is affecting your game. If people don't like the chairs, they're like moving around all the time and because the chairs aren't comfortable, that's environmental. If people are falling asleep in their chairs because the chairs are too comfortable, that's also environmental. And believe it or not, you can actually learn from that. Some people will just sit down at a game and fall asleep because they had an environment where that was sort of not allowed, but encouraged.
Okay.
Like, oh man, we've got the nicest, fluffiest chairs, and everything you could possibly ask for is catered to your desire. You don't ever have to get up. Okay, and that's going to cause people to fall asleep.
Okay.
So, if it's me falling asleep, it's not because it's the chairs. It's because I don't sleep. No, I don't. Fuck you.
Language.
You can fucking say fuck on the fucking podcast. What the fuck kind of fucking shit is that?
I'm like Captain America over here. Language.
Hey, Captain America said ass.
Yeah, he did.
Okay, so
That's true.
he started going up that gravy train of getting the fuck.
Yeah,
starting with ass.
We have a player in our group who I know she has had environmental training. She brings like if it's not here, but she has like a butt pad basically because the chairs are too uncomfortable.
Yeah.
They don't like, especially when we were playing at the store, the chairs had no support.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and so she'd actually bring like one of those like stadium seat things to like.
I swear to God, sometimes sitting on the floor was better. Like there's more support.
Yeah. Why do you think one of our other players was always like on the floor because his back was hurting so much?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I DM'd, I stood up, but that's because I be getting hyped.
So this is all like really like theoretical and like really, really up in the clouds. Let's bring this down. Let's bring this down. Ground it a little bit. So how do we do this? How do we use all of these things we just talked about to create a positive environment? There's only one way. People first. All right? So you two, you're my friends, you're my brothers, but you are people before any of that.
Shit, I'm an individual. I ain't people.
Fine. Fair enough. But you see what I'm saying is you are a person.
Yeah.
Before you are anything else.
Yeah.
You have emotions, you have needs, you have dreams and hopes. All of those things come first.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to.
Okay.
Okay? And that's what, as the DM, you got to realize. Every one of your players coming to your table, they're not coming to your table because they just want to waste time. Maybe some of them are. Most people, they have an agenda. They have a reason to be there. They want to play. They want to get to the point where they're playing a 20-level bard. Whatever. That's what they want to do. That's what they want to do. And as the GM, you got to recognize that. You got to know what their wants and needs are and you don't necessarily have to cater to it, but keep that in mind as you're running your group, that everybody is their own person.
Can you tell this to one of my old DMs? Because that game sucked.
Actually, D20, you got a story about people not treating you like a person.
Oh, let's go to the ways of day back when people with D&D treated me like crap. So, I go...
3 days ago.
So, I went to the sixth layer of hell.
Yeah.
The sixth layer of hell, and it was my first day there, and there was a social contract that was read out. It said, basically treat others like you want to be treated. We're all equal here. Don't talk over each other. Just the basic do's and don'ts that can be applied to any D&D table. All right, all nice and happy. I got my player. I'm all happy and stuff and everything. And have you ever seen Grimace before from McDonald's? Imagine that 3 times as big in human form. So Grimace is because I use D&D Beyond. Grimace is looking over at my phone. Why are your stats so low? I'm like, A, I don't know you. B, I don't know you. C, why are you looking at my phone? D, I don't know you. And E, why are you looking at my phone? So I say, it's random. It's randomly rolled. I use D&D Beyond. I use the random. Well, you're not supposed to have stats that low. Now, note, this entire interaction is during the actual session. So the DM is looking at us like Ron Burgundy. I'm looking at Grimace like Ron Burgundy. And he's looking at me like, General Hartman from Full Metal Jacket.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Okay? So he's like, take out 3d6 right now. I'm like, okay. That's your new stat. Put that in there. So I'm just like, this is my first day. You just gave me a social contract to not be a dick, and you're being an ultimate dick? So after that, this is the funny part. So I asked my DM, hey, that stat that I changed in the middle of the game, not on break, in the middle of the game, am I allowed to keep that? So he's like, I don't even know, dude. Let's go talk to the bigwigs. So I talk to the bigwigs, and they're asking me what happened. And they're laughing because they're just like, okay, Grimace has given us trouble before. And on all days, your first day and the day of the social contract. And guess who come up from behind? This purple wobbly motherfucker talk about, hey, bigwigs, what's going on? I'm just like, oh no, Grimace is here. So he goes on a tirade of why my stats were so low and why is he even at the table? And it's just like, the bigwigs were just like, why would you shoot yourself in the foot like this? Why? I mean, it's not even shooting yourself in the foot. Because, like, when you hear someone say, shoot yourself in the foot, you think, like, like a Dillinger, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like a little... You know what I'm saying? Like a dark... No. This dude had a over-the-shoulder grenade launcher pointed at the floor. You know what I'm saying? There's a motherfucker holding it in the back. Guidance system and just... Boom! This... Oh, man. After that day, I never saw him again.
Yeah, it was... that was a fun little adventure. And, and what made you feel like not a person? Because you had this whole character concept in mind, and, like, what happened?
It was just like, my whole thing was, of 6 people at this table, why am I so important that you got to be all up in the video, worried about what I'm doing, when it's 6 other people at this table doing the exact same thing I'm doing? You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, me being my age is too old for this. I'm too old for this. This is a game about imaginary people and plastic dice. Why you all up in the video? Why is it that deep? Why are you getting all huffy puffy? You know what I'm saying? Over an imaginary character.
And it wasn't, to be clear, it wasn't like you were giving yourself an advantage. In fact, it was quite the opposite.
Yes, it was a severe disadvantage, but I had a plan to work with that disadvantage. It was a very funny plan too, and it was
But that was your agenda. That was what you wanted to bring to the table.
Yeah,
and he was stomping all over it like fucking King Kong
or Grimace.
But see, and that's the thing is he was a DM in that group. And honestly, he was not putting you as a person first. He was putting his
he was a
agenda.
Player. He wasn't the DM.
And
he was
actually,
just a
at
player.
that point, he wasn't allowed to DM.
Yeah,
But he knew better. Is
Yes.
my point.
Yeah. He has the experience of being a DM.
And he should have known better.
Yes.
Should have.
Keyword. Should have.
But my point here is that because he was stomping all over your character and all over your character concept and not letting you play the way you needed to play, he was not valuing you as a person.
Yeah.
He was only valuing his own agenda,
Yes.
which was to look good to you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, but the brain cells of D&D and how it works and not being a dick were too far apart that they couldn't rub against each other.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it was like going off what he was saying. It was just like, okay, are you fucking with Hex Rebo or are you fucking with D20? You know what I'm saying? Like, are you doing both? Because you're obviously whipping it out and throwing it on the table and saying mine is bigger than yours. You know what I'm saying? No matter which it is. So, okay. So look, we had our experience, did our complaining as stories as a player, but as the DM, you know what I'm saying? Going behind the screen, how can a DM prevent all that from happening?
All right. Well, this is really where we're kind of heading towards. This is the meat and potatoes of this podcast.
Okay. This episode.
Of this episode, yeah. Not of the podcast, of the episode. Very specific. So, really what it is genuine listening to feedback. Like, as the GM, you're going to have people come to you with problems. And they may be about you. They may be about other players. They may be about your story. And the truth is you kind of have to realize that this is... You got to hear that feedback because they are a person, all right? Mm-hmm. And if you come up with walls up and you're getting attacked in the defense, you putting every defense out, you're going to get nowhere and you're probably going to lose a player.
It's funny you say that because at the end of every one of my sessions, I ask for player feedback.
And that's a great habit.
Because, I don't, it's cool to me. You may hate it every minute of it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
And yeah, that's actually, that moves right into the next thing, which is actually reflecting on yourself. You need to reflect on yourself as a GM, how the session went, how things can go. You need to reflect on your players. How did the players behave? What were they doing during the game? Did people seem bored? Did they seem excited? Mm-hmm. You need to know that stuff, and you need to reflect on your games. But you also need to reflect on your story. How's your story going? Is it going the way you want? Is it going the way the players want? You need to kind of keep that in mind.
How do we differentiate? How do we differentiate the difference between how I want the story to go and how the players want the story to go?
Let's go right back to the golden rule. What's the only way you can succeed in a game?
Fail.
Well, at the end of the day, what is the only thing that determines whether that game was a success or not?
If you had fun.
So, if the players aren't having fun with the story, if you're not having fun with the story, then there's a problem.
Okay.
And that's how you determine whether or not, there is an issue there. And so, if you're looking at your players and everybody's got their head in their hands and they're waiting for their next roll, they're on their phones, they're on a video game system, they're tapping on the table, they're falling asleep, something wrong. There is something wrong at that moment. Okay. Now, if it's one player, maybe that's just something you need to take that player aside, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Mm-hmm. But if it's your whole table, you need to reconsider what you're doing as the GM or what your story is doing. Because sometimes, maybe it's just the GM. The GM needs to put a little pizzazz in their voice. They need to get excited. They need to be energized. that may be what you need because you say, okay, roll a d20. No. You are performing. You're performing as the GM.
Yeah.
And you want to encourage your players to perform too. They may not be totally comfortable with that, but we're going to talk about that in a second.
Like, the reason why I bring that up is I had a table, and they didn't understand the story. There was like a prequel going on, and they really didn't appreciate the prequel. Mm-hmm. But then when I explained where they were going, they were like, I kind of wish I hadn't complained and let it come out. So it's just like, like I'm open to criticism. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But sometimes there's things that I am ironclad set on. Like, for example, I do a lot of one shots, and I have maps where there's numbers on the map. Mm-hmm. And it's A, so I know what event it is, and B, it kind of helps them say, okay, let's go over here, let's go over here, let's go over here, let's go over here. And then they're like, hey, you shouldn't do that. I'm just like, okay, but this is where the events are, and it's just a one shot, so it makes it easier on everyone. And when they see my side, they're like, oh, okay, but I do see their side. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, it's not being stubborn on it, it's just not being stubborn on it.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. And honestly, what we're talking about here, there's a name for it, and it's called growth mindset. Mm-hmm. Okay, the idea is that, okay, so I've been GMing, for 20 years at this point. And that doesn't mean I know everything. Yeah. It doesn't mean that I'm the best GM on the planet. I still make mistakes. I misjudge things. I don't always follow all these rules we're talking about. Mm-hmm. It's impossible to. So just don't feel like you have to follow every rule perfectly all the time. But the most important thing to focus on is having that growth mindset where you're going to reflect on what was going on and kind of like make feasible solutions to any problems that you're seeing. And what are we going to do? We're going to preventative maintenance.
We're going to have preventative maintenance.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to do there. And honestly, we want our players to have a growth mindset. It can't just be on us as the GM. Our players need to realize that the whole point of this game is growth. You're going to level up. You're going to get better. You're going to know more. You're going on a hero's journey kind of thing. And so, or maybe a villain's journey. But, so you want to really encourage constructive feedback between your players. The story you told me before, you told our character sheets before, that's not encouraging constructive feedback. That is the literal opposite of that. and a little communication would have gone a long way. Had it been like, oh, is that what? So why is your stat so low there? Mm-hmm. First of all, you shouldn't be looking at your phone, but that's not the point. Let's just say he just happened to find out, and then he's like, oh, why'd you do that? And you're like, well, that's the character I want to play. And he's like, oh, that sounds dope. That is the situation that should have happened.
Yeah, because it's funny that you bring that specific scenario up, because when I picked it out and I had it approved, you know what I'm saying, by the manager on duty, don't start punching things. And they saw the stat and they're like, oh man, you're going to get slaughtered. All right, if you want to. And that was it. You know what I'm saying? Spread your wings and fly.
And so, like, one of the things that you really want to do is talk to your players. Mm-hmm. Always have open channels of communication. Even if it's just like a Discord server that you guys talk on like during the week about, hey, what I'm going to do with this my character. One of the things you really want to do is you want to know about your players' strengths and weaknesses and have your players know what your strengths and weaknesses are. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is you're going to have a player that is really good at making characters. Yeah. All right? And then you're going to have a player that's really good at role-playing and maybe not so great at making characters. Maybe the guy who can make characters isn't that great at role-playing. Okay, so you want to know those strengths and weaknesses so that you can accommodate them as the GM. Yeah. As the GM, you want to know that before going in and having these expectations where everybody's going to do this and that and this. Oh, nobody did any of that. Yeah. So you need to sort of set your own reasonable expectations that you're going to have for your players and make sure that your players have reasonable expectations of you. If they're coming into your table and they're expecting like, you know, like an Academy Award winning movie, they're probably going to be disappointed.
Right.
You know, so.
And at the same time, if you're expecting your players to give an Academy Award winning performance, and like, you know, they've been playing for 2 weeks, like that's it's probably not going to happen.
So setting expectations is going to be a huge thing, and so let's move on to groupthink and mob mentality. So one of the biggest problems I've ever seen in just about every table is there always ends up having some kind of groupthink. And by groupthink, what that means is you can have good groupthink and mob mentality, and you can have bad groupthink and mob mentality. And what that is let me give you a good example. You just had an awesome game. Everybody is excited. Everybody is, you know, you're all going to Denny's after because everybody's gonna get some late night dinner from having a real epic session, and everybody's talking with each other, and the inside jokes are flying, and everybody's having a good time. That's a good version of groupthink. Jung talks about he's a psychologist, kind of one of the grandfathers of psychology. He talked about an overmind, and that's kind of what he's referring to is kind of the general feel that everybody has when it comes to your group. If it's toxic and negative, this is how groupthink can quickly turn against one person and create a pariah. A pariah being the black sheep, being the guy who gets blamed for everything, the guy who is sort of the butt of every joke, or the butt monkey, basically. That is bad groupthink. That is mob mentality, and usually that person leaves, has their feelings hurt, and then it switches to another person. That person leaves, and then now it's this person, and now it's this person, and now it's this person, and then before you know it, there's nobody in the group. The group's destroyed.
Yeah. Because
mob mentality took over, groupthink took over, and it was a toxic situation, created a toxic environment. And we've talked about this before. As a GM, it's your responsibility to sort of curate that environment. You need to make sure that your players aren't talking shit about each other. That's really what it is. That's really, when you boil down to it, you can't have your players talking shit about each other, because it'll get bad. People need to hash it out. People need to come to the table and they need to talk it out, or it gets bad. So, you know, have you guys had any experiences with that?
I've had as both a player and as a DM. So as a DM, I had a situation where one of my players did not get along with another player. Just did not get along. 100% they just did not like each